Well, joining me now in Washington, D.C. is retired Iraqi Army Brigadier General Ismael Alsodani. He was also Iraq's defense attaché to the United States from 2007 to 2009. In Baghdad is Professor Rahman Aljebouri. He's a senior fellow at the American University of Iraq. And also in Baghdad is international relations professor Nashmi, who teaches at Mustansariya University. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Rahman Aljebouri, let me start with you. So we have the Prime Minister, Adel Abdul Mahdi, making the call, signing the executive order, telling the Popular Mobilization Forces, you have to be absorbed into the army. Is it easier said than done? Is this going to be difficult?
Let me start with, this is a brave steps from the Prime Minister for the executive order or the ministerial order. Implementation of such order is going to be a huge challenge for the Prime Minister. First, on two fronts, I think myself. One is embedded or integration of the BMF in the military right now will kind of put us in two dangerous two-way in this way. First is the army itself is weak right now. The commander of the army is not going to control a political elites who are controlling the Iraqi scenes of politics right now. Mm-hmm. That's one. Second, if the BMF put in the army, that means the army is going to be controlled totally by the BMF leadership. So we're having a two challenge. The Prime Minister, what he has to do, first, he has,
Okay, yeah, okay. So we'll look at what he has to do with the challenges a little bit later on, but it's good to get where you all stand on this right up front. Ismael Alsodani, these groups have been given immense power over the years, from the time of Nouri al-Maliki to the recent fight against Daesh and so on. They effectively control the streets in many towns and cities across Iraq, and they have strong allegiance to another country. This is going to be a problem whether they agree to get absorbed into the army or not, right? Because as has been mentioned by Rahman, if they're in the army, they control it.
I would like to say that those fighters or those units who participated in the fight against ISIS should have been recognized and shouldn't be demobilized without any containing solution from the government. So from one point, this decree or this order was extremely beneficial for the political scene in Iraq, because we do not want the armed forces or the security apparatuses to be part of the political process inside Iraq. This is first. And second, reintegration is so important for them to be part of the security forces. So we may have used them as a paramilitary forces to fill the gap between the policing and the military missions in the future. But the question now is the reintegration, or is this decree is enough or good enough to reintegrate them, and they will be submitted to the government command and control? This is very huge question, and I doubt, in my perspective, within these 8 items has been produced by the Prime Minister office, there are many loose ends in this decree, if I would say, need to be addressed in a proper way, so we can see practically or technically this could be accomplished or achieved in the near future and the long-term future.
Yes. If you're a militia leader who has been given tremendous power and there's been no accountability, because in the fight against Daesh, there were scores of reports of atrocities against civilians, especially Sunni civilians and so on. No accountability, immense power, you control the streets. Why on earth, General Alsodani, would you want to get integrated into an army where you're going to have to face accountability? They wouldn't want to do that, would they?
I agree with you that if we can maintain this political power over these units, many of these fighters have answered the fatwa 2014, and Iraqi government did not have any other option because Iraq was on the brink of the collapse. So there was no any other option unless mobilizing the people to stop ISIS from what they have done. And fortunately, they were very successful to drive ISIS out of the Iraqi territory. But the question is, after endorsing or passing the paramilitary or the Popular Mobilization Forces law from the parliament to 2016, the government at that time should have started the reintegration process with a very clear regulations. So first of all, they have to be disconnected from the military. Should have been disconnected from the political affiliation that they are reporting now to.
Right.
So it's an overdue implementation of the law, and the Iraqi government shouldn't do the good job to reintegrate them at that time.
Ali and Nashmi, is the bitter reality that these groups, these 140, 150,000 men have more loyalty to Tehran than they have to Baghdad? That's the reality, whether you like it or not.
No, I think since not all that groups they follow Iran, because the majority they are coming after the fatwa of Mr. Ali Al-Sistani. And but after that they connect with or link with other groups. That groups they follow Iran, the leaders, but the fighters, not only the majority. This is you should understand it. Not all the fighters as the leaders of that groups. You can say the majority of that groups, they are follow Iran. But the fighters, they are coming by the order from Iran or those leaders. But they are coming after, according to the fatwa of Ali Sistani, they follow Ali al-Sistani. And you must know, and you should know, the ideology of Ali al-Sistani, it's different than the ideology of Iran. In order that, I think, when you're talking about the popular mobilization, you should shift, or you should separate between both the groups. In order that, when they link with the army, with the army, I think we will find people they are ready to be soldiers in the army. Not only they will refuse or they still follow the Iran, but we need a term for training. Those people need training because they are militia. They are not soldiers. We need at least 6 months. After that, you must link it with the army.
But Basta Nashmi, if people look at the modern history of Iraq, you had the Iraqi army who had proper soldiers training, who ran away when Daesh were taking over towns and cities and villages, whereas these people who didn't have the proper soldiers training defeated Daesh. So that training doesn't do you any good, does it?
No, I don't mean we should training them to be good soldier. We are talking about training to be a soldier, to be a part of the army. It's not they are a part of the militia. This is I am talking training to be a soldier, not training to be to still a militia. This is I talking about. And also the situation when the collapse of Al-Mosul is different. I will give you just one example.
Sure.
The majority of those soldiers who escape from the army or going to their home, the majority of them, they follow, they return to the army as a militia. And they're fighting very good fight as a militia, but they escape from ISIL from the...
So maybe the organization of the army wasn't as good as it is right now back then, but I don't want to go down that route and discuss that fully. Rahman Aljebouri, there was an interesting mini documentary made on Vice recently. Militia leaders, for example, Hashim al-Mayahi, who's a senior military commander of Asaib, one of the militias in the PMF, telling Vice News, if there's a war between the US and Iran, we are signing up to fight the Americans. It's interesting because I wonder, has the momentum for all of this come from Pompeo's visit? Has this come from the Americans? Are the Americans telling the Iraqis, you need to sort this out immediately because we don't want the Tehran-aligned militias in Iraq turning their guns on us and fighting a battle against us? Is that where it's coming from?
This is part of it, not the whole truth. The truth is the war on ISIS is over. The Iraq need a national army with a legion for the country and under the national, command, in chief of in command or command of chief. The reason now is there is two ways again to see it. One, that Iraq is trying to find its way and not to be target for the American because of these groups. So the prime minister is under the influence of the Iranian, try to integrate them so they are really kind of hidden within the army itself. So there is no militia. That's one reason. The other reason, I think the Iranian themselves think this is an opportunity for the militia that we train. They are loyal to us, to embedded with the Iraqi army. So then it is kind of enjoying the state resources, enjoying the state protection, and fighting under the state if we want them. You know, my both colleagues talk about it. Some of the people will be their loyalty always for their religious leaders because they came from a religious background. They recruited according to the religious fatwa. So when we talk about this, it's also need what kind of training we have. It's not a military training. It's not put them in a boot camp. It is really about the loyalty. You need to integrate these people for a long period. You need to mix them with the army first, and then you have to have a new training inside the army. When you have this is a project of 2 years to 3 years to engage these people, right, to cut the connection with the military, with the political leaders and the religious group. Right. So that's a long reform kind of a process to get to that point.
Okay, so General Sudani, deep fears that you're going to have soldiers with a greater allegiance to another country than your own country. Let's try to imagine that you're given a battalion of these new recruits who were formerly part of the Shia militias. You have to take care of, I don't know, 500 of them. What do you do? How do you ensure their loyalty, and how do you ensure that they're not going to turn their guns on you and that they're going to be loyal soldiers to the Iraqi state?
Imran, I told you that this degree itself has a lots of loose ends and need to be tied up. The reintegration processes is very arduous, long, lengthy, and tough procedures, and required a professional, higher community in Iraqi government to be formed in order to put the strategies to reintegrate these people. Those people are ideologically motivated and politically affiliated to political parties. And this is the dangerous part of reintegration, how to disconnect these fighters from the political influence. As you know, any democratic country should have keeping their military apparatuses away from the political affairs or political affiliation in order not to get any trouble in the future with the military institutions. So I wouldn't, I'm not going with your assumption to have 500, fighters from these units to come under my command, because I would be overwhelmed if they wouldn't have rehabilitation program before they have been distributed to the units and merge and melt up with the military units, maybe with the police, maybe with the counter-terrorism. Maybe we would form kind of, you know, a prototype of National Guards in the United States.
Okay.
Or
that's a good point.
German.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned this because it shows the complexity of trying to sort this out. Ali and Nashmi, we saw what de-Baathification did to Iraq. It was a mess. When you had people part of an organized structure and that's just dismantled, it becomes chaos. This might be similar, right? Because as was mentioned by Ismael Alsodani, it's not just fighters. These are political players who control the streets and control governance in many parts of the country. How do you actually do this?
I think the picture, it's not like this. It's if you're focusing deeply, we can find many differences between what you're talking about, Pakistan, and between what's happening after the ISILs. Now we have two crises in Iraq. The military crisis and we're talking about the democracy crisis. They are mixed now in Iraq. When you're talking about the military side, that happened in the democracy side. Then when you're talking about when you shift or you different or you change what they are before and put it now in the state as a new, I think it's different in the Ba'athists and because the Ba'athists,
I wasn't giving a direct comparison, but I was saying when you dismantle something that's very organized, it's not as easy to absorb it into something else, is it?
No, I think it's more easy because I told you the majority of those fighters. I will tell you frankly, they are not always ideologicals. The majority that are coming because there is no job in Iraq. He said, I will come with a popular mobilization to take a salary because he don't have any job. And the majority of them, 90% of them, they go to that work to follow the Al-Fatwa, and even there is national work. In order that when when the state give them a job with salary, I think they will as the state needs. We must focusing in this case. They are very simple people.
Right.
They need job. They are
this is a good point that you make.
When they put them in the army, I think it's better.
Right. Okay. Yeah. This is a good point to make, and it's going to be an interesting test to see how this absorption happens. So far, not much resistance to disbanding as militias. So far, we're seeing all of them on board, but how this works is going to be fascinating. Gentlemen, I'll talk to you once again sometime soon, but I've got to move on for now. Ali and Nashmi, Rahman Aljebouri, and Ismael Alsodani, thanks again.